I am Audrey Mitchell, 28 years old, and the day my parents burned my $29 million inheritance check was the day I truly became my grandfather Harold Mitchell's heir. The tension in that wood-paneled law office was suffocating as Maxwell Thornton placed that check in my trembling hands. The pure hatred in my mother's eyes as she ripped it away, my father's smug satisfaction watching it burn to ash in the decorative fireplace. Their words cut deep. "This is what you get for cutting us off." But I just smiled. They had no idea what they actually destroyed. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how I turned this burning betrayal into my greatest triumph. My childhood looked perfect from the outside. The Mitchell name opened every door in Boston's elite social circles. Our three-story brownstone in Beacon Hill's summer home in the Hamptons and winter getaways to Aspen created an illusion of the perfect American family. But appearances were everything to Richard and Eleanor Mitchell, and behind closed doors, our family was anything but perfect. My parents were masters of social climbing and spending money. My father, born into moderate wealth, married my mother for her family connections, and together they built a life centered around status. Country club memberships, charity gala committees, and friendship with the right families consumed their existence. What they lacked in parenting skills they made up for in designer clothes and expensive private schools. By the time I was 7, I knew my nanny's face better than my mother's. Eleanor was too busy with her social obligations to attend my school plays or help with homework. Richard viewed children as accessories useful for family photos and polite appearances at business dinners, but otherwise an inconvenience. But I had Grandpa Harold. My father's father built Mitchell Industries from a small manufacturing shop into a billion-dollar conglomerate through sheer determination and business genius. Despite his immense success, he remained grounded, ethical, and family-oriented. When he noticed my parents' emotional neglect, he stepped in without fanfare. Our Tuesday night dinners became sacred. Every week, his driver would pick me up from whatever after-school activity I had, and we would dine at his favorite steakhouse. Sometimes, we would go to museums, baseball games, or just walk through Boston Common, talking about everything and nothing. "Money is just a tool, Audrey," he would tell me. "It can build or destroy. The choice is always yours." While my parents threw money at every problem, Grandpa Harold taught me the value of hard work. When I was 14, he helped me set up a small greeting card business selling my artwork to local shops. He could have funded the whole operation, but instead loaned me $500 with a proper business agreement, insisting I pay him back with interest. I did 6 months later, with an additional 10%. The pride in his eyes was worth more than any inheritance. As I grew older, the contrast between my grandfather's values and my parents' lifestyle became impossible to ignore. Richard and Eleanor burned through their substantial trust funds and portions of the family business that Grandpa had given them over the years. They remortgaged the brownstone twice. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, and keeping up with even wealthier friends drained their resources. They began to pressure me about my place in the family legacy. When I decided to study graphic design instead of business, my father nearly disowned me. "Mitchells aren't starving artists," he declared over an uncomfortable family dinner. "Mitchells run businesses." Grandpa Harold, though, sent me an antique drafting table for my dorm room with a note, "Create beauty. The world needs that more than another CEO." After college, I refused my parents' offer to set me up in a cushy marketing job at Mitchell Industries. Instead, I rented a tiny studio apartment and started building my graphic design business from scratch. No family connections, no Mitchell name on my business cards, just Audrey Design Studio. My parents were livid. The arguments escalated until I made the painful decision to limit contact with them. "You're choosing poverty over family," my mother accused during our last big fight. "Your grandfather would be ashamed." But he wasn't. When I showed Harold my first major client contract earned entirely on my own merit, his eyes welled with tears. "You understand what building something truly means," he said. "That makes you a real Mitchell." Our weekly dinners continued into my 20s even as his health began to decline. Each meeting he shared more about the business, the family history, and his philosophies on wealth and responsibility. Sometimes he would make cryptic comments about my parents that I didn't fully understand. "They're waiting for me to die, he mentioned casually over dessert one evening, about 6 months before the end. Your father checks stock prices before he asks about my health." During our last coherent conversation, 3 weeks before he passed, Grandpa squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Everyone shows their true colors eventually," he said. "Remember that nothing valuable is ever truly lost." When pneumonia put him in the hospital that final time I visited daily, my parents, who had barely spoken to Harold in months, suddenly appeared with flowers and forced cheer. I caught them whispering with his doctors about prognosis and treatment options, not out of concern for his comfort but impatience for resolution. Harold Mitchell passed away peacefully in his sleep on a Tuesday night. I had spent the evening reading him the business section of the newspaper, just as we had done every Tuesday for nearly 2 decades. My parents were at a fundraiser gala. The next morning, as I sat shell-shocked in my apartment, my phone rang constantly with calls from family members who had barely acknowledged my existence for years. Everyone suddenly remembered Grandpa Harold's special bond with me, as if preparing their narratives for whatever was to come. The funeral was a spectacle that would have made Grandpa Harold roll his eyes. St. Michael's Cathedral was filled with Boston's elite, many of whom I suspected my grandfather had little use for in life. My father had insisted on the grandest possible arrangements, arguing that a titan of industry deserves a proper send-off. My mother wore designer black with perfectly applied makeup that somehow still suggested devastation. Her performance of grief included well-timed handkerchief dabs and leaning dramatically on my father's arm. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in the front row, my actual grief too raw and real for theatrical display. After the service, the reception at the Mitchell estate became a networking event thinly disguised as a memorial. I overheard my father discussing potential business mergers before the catered hors d'oeuvres were even served. My mother cornered the mayor's wife, something about a committee position opening up. I escaped to Grandpa's study, seeking a moment of genuine reflection among his books and the lingering scent of his pipe tobacco. That's where Bradley found me, his designer loafers, silent on the thick carpet. "The prodigal granddaughter," he said, leaning against Grandpa's desk as if he already owned it. "Ready for your big payday." Bradley, my father's brother's son, had always viewed me as competition for Grandpa's affection. While I genuinely loved Harold, Bradley saw him as a resource to be mined. Every family gathering became a contest to impress the patriarch. "I'm not thinking about money today," I replied, wishing he would leave. "Sure you're not." His smirk was insufferable. "We all know you had his ear. Those little dinners playing the dutiful granddaughter while the rest of us actually worked in the family business." I left without responding. Bradley had been spreading these insinuations for years, suggesting I manipulated our grandfather for personal gain. The irony was painful, considering I was the only family member who had refused Harold's financial help. The next day, my parents invited me to lunch at Le Bernardin, a restaurant far too expensive for their dwindling finances. Eleanor ordered champagne before addressing the reason for our sudden reconciliation attempt. "Family must stand together in times of grief," she said, reaching across the white tablecloth to pat my hand. "Your grandfather would want that." Richard nodded solemnly. Harold believed in the Mitchell legacy continuing undivided. Their meaning was clear beneath the platitudes. Whatever inheritance might be coming my way should be shared with the family, specifically with them. Grandpa believed in financial independence, I countered. He talked about it often. My father's smile tightened. "Your grandfather said many things depending on his audience. To the family, he always emphasized unity." The awkward lunch ended with vague threats disguised as concern. "We just worry about your ability to handle significant assets," my mother said sweetly. "Investment management can be so complicated for someone without experience." 2 days later, Martha Jenkins, my grandfather's personal assistant for over 30 years, asked to meet for coffee. Unlike the other employees at Mitchell Industries, Martha had always treated me normally, not as the boss's granddaughter. She arrived at our meeting spot carrying a sealed envelope. "Harold asked me to give you this after the funeral, but before the will reading," she explained, sliding the thick envelope across the table. He was very specific about the timing. The envelope contained a brief letter in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. "Audrey, if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't open the enclosed envelope until after the will reading. Trust that I know exactly what I'm doing, even if it doesn't immediately make sense." Remember our conversations about seeing people's true nature. That time has come. Whatever happens at the reading, remain calm and dignified. You are a Mitchell, in all the ways that matter. All my love, Grandpa. A second sealed envelope was marked after the will reading in red ink. That night, I called my best friend Cassie, the only person outside the family I could trust completely. We had met in college when she was studying photography, and unlike most people, she had never cared about my family name. Grandpa's being cryptic from beyond the grave, I told her, explaining the mysterious letter. Sounds like he's setting up some kind of test, Cassie suggested. You said he always talked about seeing people's true colors. But what kind of test? And for who? Me or the rest of them? Maybe both, she said. Whatever happens, promise me you'll stay true to yourself. That's what Harold would want. The night before the will reading, my parents called 3 times. When I finally answered, their desperation was palpable even through the phone. Family loyalty is everything to the Mitchells, my father reminded me. Your grandfather understood that. Whatever Harold left you, remember who raised you, my mother added. I nearly laughed at that. Nannies and boarding schools had raised me with Grandpa Harold providing the only real parental guidance I'd ever known. That morning, I woke to a strange call from Maxwell Thornton, my grandfather's attorney for over 40 years. Miss Mitchell, I just wanted to confirm you'll be attending today, he said formally. Of course, Mr. Thornton. 2:00 your office. There was a pause before he added, and you're prepared for anything that might occur. The question seemed odd. I suppose so. Good. Another pause. Your grandfather had great faith in you, Audrey. Remember that today. As I hung up, the weight of something momentous settled over me. Whatever Grandpa Harold had planned today would reveal it all. The offices of Thornton Weiss and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building. I arrived 15 minutes early, but several family members had beaten me there. The receptionist directed me to a large conference room where Uncle Walter and Aunt Patricia sat stiffly beside their son Bradley. My parents had claimed seats at the head of the table nearest to where Mr. Thornton would presumably sit. Audrey, darling, my mother called with false warmth. Sit by us. I chose a seat on the opposite side, instead ignoring Bradley's smirk. Gradually, the room filled with extended family members, most of whom only appeared at major holidays and funerals. Several Mitchell Industries executives entered, including the CFO and operations director, which struck me as unusual for a family will reading. At precisely 2:00, Maxwell Thornton entered with 2 associates carrying stacks of folders. Martha Jenkins followed, setting up a laptop and projector. The room fell silent as Mr. stayed. Thornton adjusted his glasses and opened a thick binder. Thank you all for coming, he began formally. We are here to execute the last will and testament of Harold Edward Mitchell as amended 3 months ago. My father shifted at this information. Amended. There was no notification of changes. Mr. Mitchell was under no obligation to notify family of updates to his will. Mr. Richard Thornton replied coolly. Shall we proceed? The reading began with standard legal language and smaller bequests. Loyal household staff received generous sums. Several charities important to Grandpa were gifted substantial donations. Bradley received his grandfather's vintage watch collection and $500,000. He scowled at the relatively modest inheritance. As Thornton continued, the mood in the room grew increasingly tense. My parents leaned forward when their names were mentioned, then froze as the attorney announced they would receive my grandfather's vacation home in Aspen and $1 million, a fraction of what they had clearly expected. This must be a mistake, my father interrupted. My father promised substantial provisions. There is no mistake, Thornton continued calmly. Mr. Mitchell was very clear about his wishes. Uncle Walter and Aunt Patricia received similar modest bequests, causing Walter to mutter angrily under his breath. The Mitchell Industries executives were granted small percentages of company shares, but the majority of the business remained unaccounted for. After addressing all standard bequests, Thornton paused and removed his glasses. Now to the matter of Mitchell Industries' controlling interest and the bulk of Harold Mitchell's financial assets. The room went completely silent. Even the subtle shifting in leather chairs ceased. Mr. Mitchell has directed that I now present a special bequest to his granddaughter, Audrey Elizabeth Mitchell. All eyes turned to me. My mother's gaze was particularly intense, a mixture of expectation and warning. Thornton signaled to one of his associates who approached with a large envelope. From it, the attorney removed an official check and held it up for all to see. This check in the amount of $29 million represents a portion of Harold Mitchell's liquid assets. He has directed that I present this to Audrey personally, with specific instructions that I will address momentarily. The check, when placed in my hands, felt impossibly heavy. The amount was written in both numbers and words with my name clearly printed. I stared at it, my grandfather's final message to me still unclear. The explosion came instantly. My mother lunged across the table, her manicured hand closing around the edge of the check. "This is preposterous," my father shouted, standing so quickly his chair toppled backward. Harold would never leave the bulk of his estate to an inexperienced girl who rejected the family business. My mother's grip tightened on the check. Audrey will be sharing this with the family, of course, as Harold would have wanted. When I didn't immediately agree, something snapped in Eleanor Mitchell's perfectly composed face. With surprising strength, she ripped the check from my hands. "Richard," she commanded, "show her what happens to those who turn their backs on family." My father produced a gold lighter, the one Grandpa had given him on his 30th birthday. With theatrical flair, he flicked it open and held the flame to the corner of the check. "This is what you get for cutting us off," he spat as the paper caught fire. "For thinking you were better than us." They dropped the burning check into a decorative brass fireplace at the side of the conference room, watching with satisfaction as $29 million turned to ash. The room erupted in shocked gasps and exclamations. Bradley looked torn between horror and delight at the family drama. Uncle Walter began loudly proclaiming that the entire will should be contested. Throughout it all, I remained seated watching the flames consume the check. A strange calm settled over me as I remembered Grandpa's letter. "Trust that I know exactly what I'm doing." A small smile formed on my lips. My mother noticed first. "What are you smiling about? Your inheritance is gone." "Is it?" I asked quietly. Maxwell Thornton cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention back to him. His expression revealed nothing, but I detected a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. "If we may continue with the reading," he said. "We have just witnessed exactly what Harold Mitchell anticipated might occur." Maxwell Thornton's composed demeanor never wavered as he observed the smoldering remains of the check in the fireplace. He simply nodded to Martha, who pressed a button on the laptop. The projector illuminated the wall with a document. "What you have just witnessed," Thornton continued, "was the completion of a test designed by Harold Mitchell to reveal character and intention." My father scoffed. "What nonsense is this?" "The check that has just been destroyed was indeed valid for $29 million, Thornton explained. "However, it represented merely a symbolic portion of Miss Audrey's actual inheritance." He gestured to the projected document. "This is the actual bequest to Audrey Elizabeth Mitchell executed and finalized 3 months ago, with funds and assets already transferred into irrevocable trusts." As the family squinted at the legal document, Thornton continued. "Harold Mitchell has bequeathed to his granddaughter the controlling interest in Mitchell Industries amounting to 68% of all shares. Additionally, a trust has been established in her name containing liquid assets and investments valued at approximately $500 million. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother sank slowly into her chair, her face ashen. "This cannot be legal," my father finally sputtered. "I assure you it is entirely legal," Thornton replied. Furthermore, Mr. Mitchell recorded a video message to be played at this precise moment. Martha adjusted the laptop, and suddenly Grandpa Harold's face appeared on the wall. Though clearly filmed during his final weeks, his eyes retained their sharp intelligence. "If you're watching this," he began, "then Maxwell has just revealed the truth about Audrey's inheritance, likely after someone tried to interfere with the symbolic check. I have spent the last 10 years observing how wealth has affected my family. What I've seen has disappointed me deeply." The camera shifted slightly as he adjusted his position. "Richard Eleanor, you have squandered every opportunity and resource given to you while treating my granddaughter as competition rather than family. The modest provisions I've left you reflect my assessment of your character." My father's face flushed deep red as Grandpa continued. Audrey alone has demonstrated the values upon which I built this company: integrity, independence, and genuine care for others. She has earned my trust and my legacy. Grandpa's eyes seemed to look directly at me. Audrey, if they destroyed that check as I suspected, they might remember our conversation about true colors. You now know exactly who you're dealing with. The video ended and Thornton resumed. The symbolic check was Mr. Mitchell's way of revealing intentions. He predicted accurately, it seems, that certain parties might attempt to control or appropriate Audrey's inheritance. He produced another document. I have here the formal transfer papers granting Miss Mitchell controlling interest in Mitchell Industries effective immediately. The board has already been notified. Martha stepped forward with another folder. Mr. Mitchell also instructed me to provide documentation of his mental fitness, signed by 3 independent physicians, anticipating potential challenges to the will. The evidence was overwhelming and clearly prepared with meticulous legal precision. As reality sank in, my parents' expressions transformed from shock to desperate calculation. "Audrey, darling," my mother began, her voice honey sweet. "We were only trying to protect you from making mistakes with such a large sum. Obviously, we fully support your inheritance." My father nodded eagerly. "Family misunderstandings happen in times of grief. We should discuss your new role privately as family." Bradley slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. She knows nothing about running the company. I've worked there since college." Mr. Mitchell anticipated these objections as well, Thornton noted. He documented extensively his reasons for this decision, including detailed assessments of all family members' business, acumen, and character. Martha stepped forward again. "Additionally, we have now preserved video evidence of the check being deliberately destroyed with accompanying threats and statements that could be relevant should any legal challenges arise." The implication was clear: any attempt to contest the will would only expose their own actions. As the meeting concluded, Thornton asked me to remain for a private discussion. My parents hovered uncertainly by the door until the attorney firmly requested they leave. Their expressions as they departed contained a mixture of rage, calculation, and a new emotion I had never seen directed at me before: fear. Once alone with Thornton and Martha, I finally opened the second envelope Grandpa had left me. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small key. "Dearest Audrey," it read, "if you're reading this, you've witnessed the test and its results. I never doubted you would pass with flying colors, but others needed to reveal themselves. The symbolic check was substantial enough to tempt, but represented only a fraction of what is now yours. The key enclosed opens my personal safe at home, containing my private journals and information you may find useful in the days ahead. Remember that while you can forgive, you must never again trust blindly. Lead with the compassion and integrity that has always made me proud. All my love, your Grandpa Harold." Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter. Martha gently squeezed my shoulder. "He was absolutely certain of his decision," she said quietly. "I've never seen him more at peace than when he finalized these arrangements." Thornton nodded in agreement. "In 43 years as his attorney, I never saw Harold more confident about anything than his faith in you, Audrey." The hours following the will reading passed in a blur of paperwork and explanations. Maxwell Thornton walked me through the details of my inheritance with methodical precision. The trust was structured to provide both income and growth, with provisions for charitable giving that aligned with Grandpa's values. The Mitchell Industries shares came with immediate voting rights, but also significant responsibilities. "The quarterly board meeting is next week," Thornton noted. "Harold intended for you to take his seat. Are you prepared for that?" The magnitude of what had happened was still sinking in. "I don't know anything about running a billion-dollar company," I admitted. "Which is precisely why Harold arranged for a 6-month transition period," Thornton explained. "Key executives have been briefed and instructed to provide complete orientation. Martha will continue as your assistant if you wish." Martha nodded. "Harold spent the last year preparing documentation to help you understand the business from the ground up." By the time I left the office, darkness had fallen over Boston. 22 missed calls illuminated my phone screen, 12 from my mother, 8 from my father, and 2 from Bradley. Voice messages ranged from tearful apologies to thinly veiled threats. "Audrey, darling, call us immediately," my mother's voice quavered. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." My father's message took a different approach. This company has been in our family for generations. You have no right to exclude your own parents from its management. Call me before you make an even bigger mistake." Bradley's message was simply, "This isn't over." I turned off my phone and took a taxi to Cassie's apartment, knowing my own place wouldn't feel safe tonight. "Holy shit," was Cassie's response after I recounted the day's events. "Your grandfather was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers." "I still can't believe they actually burned the check," I said, the image of the flaming paper still vivid in my mind. "Believe it," Cassie replied firmly. "People show you who they are if you pay attention. Your grandfather clearly was paying attention for years." The next morning I awoke to knocking at Cassie's door. Through the peephole, we saw my parents standing in the hallway looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "We know you're in there," Audrey, my father, called. "We just want to talk." Cassie called building security while I remained silent. After they were escorted out, I checked my email to find a message from Audrey Mitchell to all extended family members, claiming I had manipulated my grandfather in his final days and promising to restore the family legacy to its rightful heirs. That afternoon, a courier delivered an invitation to an emergency family meeting at my parents' home. The note stressed family unity and resolving misunderstandings. "It's a trap," Cassie warned. "They'll gang up on you." "I know," I replied, "but I need to face them eventually." Maxwell Thornton advised against attending without legal representation, so he accompanied me to the brownstone where I had grown up but never felt at home. The living room was filled with family members, many of whom I barely knew. My parents had clearly been working the phones gathering allies. When I entered with Thornton, conversations stopped abruptly. "Audrey," my mother stepped forward with open arms. "We're so glad you came." I remained by the door. What exactly is this meeting about? My father took over his businessman persona firmly in place. "We want to discuss a family approach to managing Mitchell Industries. Your grandfather's decisions were unexpected, but we can work together to honor his legacy appropriately." "By appropriately, you mean reversing his explicit wishes?" Thornton asked mildly. "This is a family matter," my father snapped. "Actually, it's a legal matter," I corrected him. "Grandpa Harold made his decisions clear. The company shares and trust are already transferred. There's nothing to discuss." Bradley stepped forward, his handsome face arranged in a concerned expression. "Audrey, no one questions that grandfather wanted you to have a role. But running a company like Mitchell Industries requires experience and business knowledge." Several relatives nodded in agreement. "Which is why Harold arranged for extensive training and support," Thornton interjected. "He spent a year preparing this transition." My mother changed tactics, tears welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. "How can you do this to us? After all we've sacrificed for you?" The audacity of that statement broke something inside me. Sacrificed. "You shipped me off to boarding school at 12. Grandpa was more of a parent to me than either of you ever were." "We gave you everything," my father shouted, his composed facade cracking. "No, Grandpa gave me everything that mattered," I replied steadily, "including the ability to see exactly what's happening right now." I looked around the room at the assembled relatives. This meeting isn't about family unity. It's about undermining Grandpa's wishes because you're all unhappy with your inheritances. Uncle Walter stood up. "Now listen here, young lady." "No, you listen," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "Grandpa Harold made his decisions for specific reasons. You all have a choice now. You can accept those decisions and maintain a relationship with me and the company, or you can continue this futile attempt to intimidate me and be cut off completely." The room fell silent. "That sounds like a threat," Bradley finally said. "It's not a threat," I replied. "It's a boundary. I'm honoring Grandpa's wishes and his faith in me. Anyone who can't respect that has no place in my life or in the company's future." With that, Thornton and I left. As the door closed behind us, I heard the explosion of voices resume. The next morning, I entered Mitchell Industries headquarters for my first official meeting with the executive team. Escorted to the top floor by security, I felt the weight of curious stares from employees who had only ever seen me at company picnics. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 8 executives, mostly men in their 50s and 60s who had worked with my grandfather for decades, studied me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Gentlemen," I began, taking the seat at the head of the table. I know this transition wasn't what most of you expected. I have a lot to learn, and I'll be counting on your expertise. James Wilson, the CFO who had worked alongside Grandpa for 30 years, spoke first. Harold explained his decision to us last month. He was quite confident in you, Miss Mitchell. Please call me Audrey, I replied. And I hope to earn that confidence. Some of us have concerns, admitted Robert Landry, the operations director. No offense, but your background is in graphic design, not corporate management. That's a valid concern, I acknowledged, which is why I'm not going to make any major changes for the first 6 months. My priority is learning the business from all of you who've helped build it. My candor seemed to ease some tension in the room. By meeting's end, several executives had shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism. Wilson even offered to schedule one-on-one briefings with each department. As news of my inheritance spread through Boston's social circles, my parents launched what could only be described as a smear campaign. Former family friends reported that Richard and Eleanor were telling anyone who would listen that I had manipulated a senile old man and stolen their birthright. Meanwhile, Bradley began approaching board members and major shareholders, suggesting my leadership would destabilize the company. 3 days after the will reading, Mitchell Industries stock dropped 8% on rumors of family discord. That evening, I received an alarming call from my apartment building's security. My parents had attempted to enter my unit claiming they needed to collect family heirlooms. When denied access, they created a scene in the lobby threatening legal action against the building management. I knew then that the situation would get worse before it got better. 1 week after the will reading, I moved into Grandpa Harold's office at Mitchell Industries headquarters. The large corner office remained exactly as he had left it, from the antique desk to the wall of family photos. I noticed that recent pictures of my parents were conspicuously absent, while several frames held images of Grandpa and me at various ages. Martha helped me settle in explaining his filing system and the private elevator that had allowed him to come and go without passing through the main office areas. He used that more in his final months, she explained. Didn't want people gossiping about his health. Using the key from Grandpa's letter, I opened his personal safe hidden behind a painting of the original Mitchell factory. Inside were leather-bound journals dating back decades, USB drives labeled by year, and several folders marked family in his distinctive handwriting. The contents were illuminating. Grandpa had meticulously documented my parents' financial misdeeds over 20 years, loans never repaid, company resources misappropriated for personal use, even attempts to redirect company funds through falsified invoices. Most disturbingly, I discovered evidence that my father had attempted to sell proprietary technology to competitors, twice stopped only by Grandpa's intervention. Did you know about all this? I asked Martha, showing her the folders. She nodded solemnly. Harold protected them from legal consequences many times, hoping they would change. When they didn't, he began planning for the company's future without them. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Check your email. You'll want to see this before the gala tomorrow. The anonymous email contained screenshots of texts between my parents and Bradley discussing plans to publicly confront me at the upcoming Mitchell Foundation Charity Gala, an annual event that drew Boston's elite. Their strategy involved creating a scene that would undermine my credibility with key business associates and social connections. I forwarded the evidence to Thornton, who advised canceling my appearance. But something in me rebelled against hiding. Grandpa wouldn't back down, I told Cassie as she helped me prepare for the gala. Neither will I. I arrived at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, wearing a simple black gown, Martha and Thornton flanking me like protective sentinels. The ballroom fell into a hush as I entered, then erupted in whispers. My parents held court near the champagne fountain, my mother resplendent in diamonds that I suspected she could no longer afford. For an hour I circulated among guests, many of whom seemed surprised by my composure and clarity when discussing the company's future. Several longtime business associates of my grandfather offered support, having apparently anticipated his succession plans better than my parents had. The confrontation came during dinner. My mother approached the microphone supposedly to thank donors, then veered wildly off script. I must address the elephant in the room, she announced, champagne glass wavering slightly in her hand. Many of you have heard about the recent tragic events in our family. The room quieted as she continued. My father-in-law, in his declining mental state, was sadly manipulated in his final months. Our daughter, who had little interest in the family business until recently, suddenly finds herself in control of a company she knows nothing about. Gasps and uncomfortable shifting filled the ballroom. My father stood beside her, nodding solemnly. As her parents, we are concerned not only for the company built by generations of Mitchells, but for Audrey herself. The pressure of such responsibility on someone so unprepared. I rose from my seat, walking calmly to the stage. My mother faltered as I reached for the microphone. "Thank you, Mother, for your concern," I said evenly. "I'd like to clarify a few points for everyone here who respected and admired my grandfather." The room fell completely silent. Harold Mitchell was examined by 3 independent physicians who confirmed his complete mental competence when he updated his will. These updates were made not in his final weeks, but 3 months before his passing, and were part of a succession plan years in the making. I looked directly at my parents. As for my qualifications, my grandfather spent the last decade personally mentoring me in business ethics and company operations, believing that character and integrity were as important as technical knowledge. My father moved toward the microphone, but I continued. In the interest of transparency, I should mention that Mitchell Industries' legal team is currently investigating several financial irregularities involving company resources over the past 5 years. Anyone with information should contact Mr. Thornton's office. The implied threat was clear. My parents froze their faces, draining of color. Now let's return to the true purpose of tonight's event, supporting the charitable work my grandfather believed in so deeply. The applause that followed was tentative at first, then grew stronger. As I stepped away from the microphone, several board members approached to express their support. My parents slipped out a side door before dinner was complete. The following week brought the pivotal board meeting where I would present my vision for Mitchell Industries. The night before, Richard Mitchell made one final desperate move, calling an old family friend who served as our head of international sales. He offered me $1 million to publicly question your competence at the board meeting, the executive told me, showing me the text messages. Said it was just the first installment if I could get others to join in. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That Harold Mitchell hired me 30 years ago, and my loyalty remains with his vision for this company." He smiled. "Besides, in 1 month you've shown more interest in understanding this business than your father has in his entire life." The board meeting itself was anticlimactic after weeks of drama. I presented a conservative but forward-looking plan that honored Grandpa's vision while gradually incorporating my own strengths in design and modern marketing approaches. Mitchell Industries was built on innovation and integrity, I concluded. Those values don't change with leadership. What will evolve is how we express those values in a changing marketplace. The vote to approve my transition from interim to permanent CEO was unanimous. That evening, my parents made their final desperate move. Through a mutual acquaintance, they threatened to expose family secrets to the press if I didn't agree to a more generous financial arrangement for them. The mutual friend looked uncomfortable delivering the message. They mentioned something about Harold's first marriage and a scandal in the 80s. I smiled, remembering a specific entry in Grandpa's journals. "Please tell my parents I'm aware of all the family history, including the fact that Grandpa deliberately leaked that old story himself in 1992 to distract from a major product launch by a competitor." I paused before adding, "Also inform them that their monthly allowance from the family trust depends entirely on their future behavior. Grandpa's provisions allow me significant discretion. Sometimes the most effective boundary is financial, especially with people who value money above all else." 6 months after the will reading, Mitchell Industries had not only stabilized, but thrived under the new leadership structure. The stock price had recovered and then climbed 15% as our new product line, one that had been in development during Grandpa's final year, exceeded market expectations. I had settled into a leadership rhythm that combined my grandfather's wisdom with my own strengths. My background in design proved unexpectedly valuable in product development meetings, where I could bridge the gap between technical specifications and user experience in ways the company had previously overlooked. The Mitchell Foundation for Education and Innovation, established with $100 million from my inheritance, had already funded scholarships for 300 students pursuing careers in both business and creative fields. The foundation's mission statement, bridging commerce and creativity, reflected the balance Grandpa Harold had valued and that I was determined to carry forward. After much reflection, I had made the difficult decision to provide my parents with a modest monthly stipend contingent on their behavior. The arrangement formalized through Thornton's office included strict conditions: no public disparagement of me or the company, no contact without prior arrangement through attorneys, and mandatory financial counseling. "Are you sure about this?" Cassie had asked when I explained my decision. "After everything they did." "It's not about forgiveness," I explained. "It's about not becoming bitter. Grandpa could have cut them off completely years ago but chose a middle path. I'm following his example." My parents accepted the terms without comment. The monthly amount was sufficient for comfortable but not extravagant, living far less than their previous lifestyle but enough to avoid genuine hardship. Sometimes compassion includes boundaries. Bradley's path took a surprising turn. After several months of hostility, he requested a meeting through proper channels. Over coffee in a neutral location, he offered an unexpected apology. "I was jealous," he admitted bluntly. "Grandfather always spoke highly of you, and I resented it." Competing for his approval became a habit I couldn't break. While I wasn't ready to trust him completely, I appreciated his honesty. When he expressed genuine interest in continuing with the company, I assigned him to our West Coast office where his sales experience could be valuable, but he would report to regional management rather than directly to me. "Second chances come with accountability," I told him. "Prove yourself there, and we'll reassess in a year." One rainy Tuesday afternoon, almost exactly a year after Grandpa Harold's passing, Maxwell Thornton requested a meeting at his office. When I arrived, he presented me with a small wooden box. "Harold left instructions that this should be given to you 1 year after his passing," the attorney explained. "He wanted to ensure you had found your footing before receiving his final message." Inside the box was a vintage fountain pen I recognized from countless Tuesday dinners watching Grandpa make notes on napkins and business plans. Accompanying it was a letter written in his distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Audrey, if you're reading this, a year has passed since I left. Knowing you, you've already navigated the challenges I anticipated with more grace than I could have hoped for." The pen enclosed was given to me by my father when I took over the company. It has signed every major Mitchell Industries contract for 3 generations. Now it belongs to you not because you are my granddaughter, but because you have earned it through your character and actions. I never doubted you would rise to the occasion even when tested by those who should have supported you most. Remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the positive impact we create and the integrity with which we live. I am forever proud of you. All my love, Grandpa. Tears streamed down my face as I held the pen, feeling the weight of legacy and love it represented. That evening, I drove to Mount Auburn Cemetery with the box in hand. At Grandpa's grave, I sat on the small bench installed nearby. "You planned it all perfectly," I said aloud, imagining him listening with that slight smile he always had when his strategies worked out. "The test, the revelation, even the timing of your final message." The wind rustled through nearby trees as I continued my one-sided conversation, updating him on company developments and personal growth. "I understand now why you structured things the way you did. You weren't just protecting the company from them. You were protecting me too, forcing me to stand on my own." As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I made a silent promise to honor not just his business legacy, but the deeper values he had lived, by integrity, compassion with boundaries, and creating positive impact. The journey from that shocking moment in the attorney's office to where I stood now had transformed me in ways I never expected. What my parents destroyed that day wasn't my inheritance, but their last opportunity to choose family over greed. What they created unwittingly was the final push I needed to embrace my own strength and purpose. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come disguised as losses. Sometimes what appears to be destroyed is merely being transformed into something stronger, more meaningful, and truly lasting. If you've experienced toxic family dynamics or had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones, share your story in the comments. How did you find the strength to stand firm? Did you discover unexpected support along the way? Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation, and share with someone who might need to be reminded that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to gaining what you truly need. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it.